I began my career thinking about the development of the novel. So I tend to think in centuries, long term, and about the direction of change. I want to step back and give you some perspective on the kinds of exciting things that we've already started to hear and we'll be hearing during the next 2 days. And I'm going to talk about enchantment, and I'm going to talk about coherence, and I'm going to then give you some tips on how to watch any AR demo. And I'm going to start off by saying that I have been accused of being an optimist, and I am still an optimist. Okay. So what do I mean by enchantment? So I mean a sense of dwelling in this augmented space that is somehow adjacent to the real world, but where contrary to reality things we wish for, things we fear, things that we imagine, that we don't need menus anymore. As Ken said, that the world is all of a sudden, the table's ready for us. This is such a New York fantasy Ken had, and such a computer science fantasy that when I started working with computer scientists, I've noticed immediately that all of their examples were about restaurants. So it's very motivating to them. So that the table is prepared for us, right? Or that fabulous things are coming into our space, and that they fill our senses, and that we're given these magical powers in order to access them. And so media are intrinsically magical. So what we have to realize is that, how many of you know what the uncanny valley is? Okay. Well, the reason there's an uncanny valley is that representation is uncanny, that all new representation freaks us out. So that when we learned as a species to speak, we thought, oh my goodness, if we can make a word and it gives us the idea of the word, maybe it'll make the thing appear. Maybe we have godlike powers. Maybe God appears when you say his words. Maybe if you know the right spell, then things go the right way. Every medium, especially when it's new, has this ability to freak us out. And so that's why we expect this enchantment, right? There's this expectation. Here is a new way of experiencing things that we imagine reified in the world. They're here in the world. And so we think we're going to have magical actions. It reinforces the sense we already have of electronic data as being magical, that we just have to get that big data and it will answer all of our questions, cure cancer, make the blind see. And that we will have also these imaginary creatures will just fill our space. So we want to believe that. And when we want to believe that, we experience it. So this is an example of a early adopter who's wants you to watch his YouTube channel, who's gotten an early HoloLens, and he is blissed out, and he says, my God, it's right in front of me. I can't believe it. I'm actually looking, what's he looking at? He's looking at a computer monitor, right? Very thrilling. And of course, he has no way to use that monitor with the HoloLens, but just the fact that it's there in the 3D space, it's mind-blowing. It's the name of his video. It's mind-blowing augmented reality. It's there. And what this is novelty. So we really have to get past the novelty, because the thing about novelty is that it wears off. And that when you build up people's expectations, it's easy to get people to think that they're going to have a whale shark in their elementary school gymnasium, for instance. But then they're going to be all the more disappointed when they don't. Or when, oh, it's just a whale shark, so now what do I do with it? Right? So to deliver on the promise, we don't just need a new headset. We need a new medium. And that takes, as Adora just said, a lot of failure and doing it over. And looking at what works and what doesn't work. So it takes a lot of experimentation, and then looking at the experimentation, seeing what sucks, which is most of it, but then immediately saying, well, what is it that we wish it to do? Well, what is it about that that really would work if somebody would actually design it? And designing for the medium, this is all part of the computer medium, it means designing interaction. If you haven't designed something that people want to do, that they do, and then they're rewarded for doing, you haven't made anything. You're just trading on novelty. And I say that at length in both of my books. One way in which I suggest thinking about this is that we need to think with more discipline about what a medium is. So a medium has to have 3 components. It has to have a way of making a lasting mark, like a finger in the sand. It has to have some kind of a standardized code so that we recognize the mark and so that it means something from you, like a telephone number, like a triangle in the sand. And then it has to have shared systems of representation. So once you get a stable platform from reliable inscription, from wax and a stylus and an alphabet, then you still need to have formats. Once you have a printing press, you have to have a newspaper. You have to have a sense of what's a feature story. What is a news story? You have to have genres. You have to have different kinds of newspapers. And you have to have conventions. What is the lead? What is the headline? All of those things that are the nuts and bolts and don't feel like magic. They feel like design, like the real work of design, are what actually makes for a advance in people's lives, for increasing our abilities to communicate and increasing our abilities to understand the world. So is AR potentially a new medium? Well, yeah, it is thrilling when my student, Tika Lin, who's sitting right here, makes an aquarium app, and I see a turtle swimming in my office through my phone. Yeah, something new is definitely there. There's a new kind of display. There's a potential of a platform. There is a new way of inscribing symbols of representation. But it's not here yet because it doesn't have a stable platform. We just have a lot of different platforms, and all of the formats and genres and conventions are just evolving. So when we look at a demo video, we get promised this immediate enchantment. So we're going to have a character, and people are also very ready to be enchanted by narrative, which is my own specialty. So yes, we want to have a story, and we want to move into a movie and be part of the movie. And so they show us a video like this, and we think, I want that. But then when we get it, do we see her the way we think we are imagining that person is seeing her? No. What we see is this, right? because the field of view is so constrained. And even if, as Ken has promised us in 5 years, which we're all going to be here in 5 years, Ken, when you extend that, that we will we're going to see everything in a real field of view. We still won't have the character there. So this is just designing beyond the affordances of the platform. But we still would have to design the conventions by which we can talk to that person. We don't know what it means to have a character who's next to us. It fills us with a very unrealistic level of expectation that they're going to understand natural language, which they're not. And so if they're just going to be recorded video, then it's going to be a cutscene, which gamers are already rate about. People hate that. So there's no way around. There's no way to say magic. There's no, for instance, magic leap into a new medium that just appears. It has to be designed. Okay. So here, I promised Phil that this was the one company that I wasn't going to make fun of. So Pokemon works because it's fit to the platform, because you don't notice that you can't see it, because hunting is part of the experience. So there's a match between the constraints of the platform, the size of the thing you're hunting for, which is already familiar to you, the collection mechanic, which is a very easy game mechanic, an ancient game mechanic, and AR, so that they have they made and then the thrill of real spaces used geographically. All of everything that is promising about the medium that we can actually do at this point, and everything that's constrained is integrated in that application. And so we get the experience of agency, which is the most important design goal that you can have when you're making anything out of bits, which is to give people that experience of wanting something, doing something, being rewarded for it. And then you get immersion. And how do we get immersion? We get immersion from giving a sense of tremendous detail and allowing people to navigate through it. And the way in which Pokemon broke is that the boundaries were not clear. So it was very ambitious to go into the real world, and the way in which people became disappointed was when it didn't match up well enough, because the real world is so complicated. So what we have a lot of is this relying on the novelty, and particularly around sharks. Because there's a jump scare, right? So this is that same guy who had his mind blown. He's looking at the shark, and ironically in that video, there's a woman who's picking up things in the environment that he's not noticing at all while he is getting into the shark. I could give a whole talk on that video. Okay, and here's Vatika. So this is a more fitting application, which she's going to demonstrate upstairs, which is an aquarium whale shark that you choose to capture. You're interested in the whale shark. It's not just somebody's thrown it into you to scare you. And then you can bring it home with you, right, with the appropriate information. So that seems like a step towards what we actually might want. Another thing that seems like a step toward what we actually might want in an otherwise really oddly conceived project is this one that Patty May showed at the last AR in action, where what's odd about it is that it mimics a genre from the pre-print, pre-writing era, where people only had their oral memory to rely on when people gave speeches and couldn't write things down. So the memory palace idea was that you put things in place, you imagine things in places to remind you of a sequence, and then you could go through the places. And here you're trying to remember which teams won Super Bowls. Okay? So you go through the Media Lab. But which, of course, this is why God gave us Google, was to remember which teams won the Super Bowl in what year, right? We don't really need to do this memory palace. But again, there's a lot about it that's a really odd, silly idea, good for a university, but that then you see, oh, but here's the part of it that really works. This is what we should build on, is that here is this dolphin in the Media Lab elevator. I want that, right? I want to be able to choose to put it, not just to have the people who made Pokemon put the stuff places, but for me, anchor something in a particular place in a way that it's retrievable by me, by other people, not sure. There's something there. That's a convention that is worth building on. I was enchanted by the Robo Raid game because, again, you don't mind the field of view. And then the whole conception of it, of robots bursting through a wall, it's a wonderful metaphor for the situation of AR, is that you're having this intrusion of these imaginary beings into your space. And then it also fits the very limited hand control that you have in AR, which is really much more important than even increasing the field of view. That until we have our hands in the space with the imaginary objects, we're not really there. But these are all the things that are good about Robo Raid. On the other hand, if you look at one of the other demo applications in the HoloLens, it's just a translation of a platform game. Well, there's no real reason why I should be doing a platform game in 3D. So it's important to do these things because they're shorthand for exploring what works and doesn't work in the space, but nobody's going to want to play them. So here are some strategies that work, and maybe you can pause this in the video in order to get more of my specific tips. I won't read it to you. But the idea is that you can't assume that the virtual presence is satisfying in itself. You have to make real-time actions that are going to engage people and that are not going to interfere with their agency. And what you want to do is merge the sense of dramatic expectation with the game mechanic. So here are some mechanics that work for that. I'll just leave that on for a second so people can see. Okay. So it's appropriate that we be aware that we are triggering this longing for the holodeck. And I've written a whole book taking the holodeck as the image of what would happen if we exploited all computation affordances to make narrative that really spoke to us the way the greatest narrative does. But to take, and you're welcome to read this book, as Ken has kindly reminded you, in the updated version. The things that I predicted in '97 have been remarkably present because I was at MIT and because you could see the way the future was going from there, and because I had this habit of thinking about the direction of change from looking at, yeah, I'm almost done, from looking at narrative over a long period of time. But it's a misleading goal because we have to know where the boundary is in order to become immersed. So if you look at punch-drunk theater, which has people in a real space, they have to wear masks in order that they know that they are not part of the presented live theater. And for one of the things that helps us to make that boundary is to use a mobile device as a boundary, as a threshold object. So a threshold object has reality in this world, and it takes us over the boundary. This is a very awkward implementation of it, but it's the right idea, that we see the spirits through the camera. This is another one of my students' projects where you can see the Georgia Tech trolley turning into the Hogwarts train through the magic and viewer. And similarly, there's a lot of potential for educational applications like this. But what we have to do in order to make them work is to make them blend the experience together. That we can't, what happens is people get too involved in the real world or too involved in their phone, and so they don't enjoy the experience of time travel, seeing a ruin in terms of what it used to be. Okay, so now I'm at my final part. How do you watch any AR demo? So you have to ask yourself, is it using jump scares? Is it using children or animals to blow your mind? Does it avoid showing how the platform is used so that it's actually operated by somebody, by a real live interactor? Is it assuming that we're all going to be thrilled to have 24 hours a day surveillance of our every move, or that we want to have somebody with us at a real person or an observer of everything that we do? And is it promising that somehow we're going to read the thoughts of all the people around us because magically AI is going to work? And if anybody's talked to Siri, I'm sure you have a lot of confidence that AI works in a seamless manner and that we're just a moment away from the singularity. If so, it's relying on this enchantment of novelty. It's just novelty. But together, we can collectively invent a medium that can expand human understanding. We can create that experience of real enchantment by blending agency and immersion. But we have to do it by coherent interaction design. Thank you.